Good afternoon. A warm welcome to all online participants for this live webinar, Integrated Fire Protection Solutions for Lithium-ion Batteries, organized by Euralarm. Before we start, a few rules for this webinar. All participants are muted, and you're free to switch on your camera if you like that. We would like to ask you to stay muted during the presentation. If you have any questions, can you please add them in the chat or in the Q&A section, and questions will be answered after we finish the presentations. Thank you for joining, and I would like to hand over to Jan Kunst, the President of Euralarm, for the opening of the webinar. Jan, please go ahead.
Thank you. So for those of you that don't yet know much about Euralarm, we represent the fire safety and security industry, providing leadership and expertise for the industry and the market, as well as for policymakers and standard bodies. Through their systems and services for fire protection, fire prevention, detection, and extinguishing, for intrusion detection, as well as access control and video monitoring for alarm transmission and alarm receiving centers, our members make society safer and more secure. We represent our industry represents about 700,000 people. We also represent a 67 billion euro market with an expected market growth of 11% until 2025. Again, for Euralarm, we're made up of 4 sections: fire detection, fire extinguishing, as well as security and services. If you go to this slide, the extinguishing section prepared this webinar, and this section is stimulating awareness of integrated extinguishing products and systems while working on initiatives to enhance safety of life and property. The section advocates quality and reliability using state-of-the-art technology. It has 16 active members made up of 9 industry members and 7 national associations. So that's a little overview about what Euralarm is. So now you do know, and let me hand it over to the chair of the section, Alan Elder. Alan, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good morning, afternoon, evening for all the people dialing in from different parts of the world. I guess the fundamental question that we are asked when we write a paper is why are we writing a paper on this particular subject? I think as we go through the presentation, we will show some videos that will illustrate very clearly what the need is for action in respect to the fire protection of applications using lithium-ion batteries. There's work going on in different regions of the world. I'm fortunate that I participate in some special interest groups in the UK, and the colleagues on the extinguishing section within Euralarm are participating in different groups in their particular regions as well. I think I should start by saying that, yes, for sure, we are in a changing world. The world is getting smarter, greener and more connected. I should imagine that most, if not all, people who are joining this webinar today will be viewing via a laptop or dialing in via a mobile phone. All devices that we are working with on a day-to-day basis invariably have some form of battery power, and increasingly those are with lithium-ion. The Green Deal in Europe will result in increased usage of batteries for storage and renewable energy, and for sure that this is an area that will expand significantly over the next few years. Move on to the next slide, Martin, please. I'm not intending to read all of the words on each of these slides, but what I would say is that as we see this expansion, we see some very scary stories and see some very scary videos on YouTube and articles that are published on LinkedIn that show electric bikes, electric scooters bursting into flames in somebody's living room. And when we look at what the implications and the impact of those events are, it does really bring home how significant an issue this is, and it's increasing. There's no question about that. One stat there at the bottom of that slide: 800,000 tons of automotive batteries, of which 190,000 tons are industrial and 160,000 tons of consumer batteries enter the European Union on an annual basis. And you can see on the chart on the right hand side of this slide just how rapidly that is expanding. So this is going up almost exponentially. Perhaps move on to the next slide, Martin, please. So applications, this is just a few, just to list a few of the applications. Portable devices, as I've mentioned, small electrical mobility devices, as well as larger mobility instruments, and then electric automotive. Plus then you've got the UPS and electric power systems and energy storage systems. What I'd like to say in terms of as we develop this guidance paper, we realised we didn't have all of the answers, and I don't think the industry has all of the answers at this particular time. And just to quote a statement that was made in one of the special interest groups that I joined, one of the commentators said, for sure, we definitely have more questions than answers at the moment in this whole field. I think I would say, and just add, that we are much more advanced in the detection of incidents involving lithium-ion batteries than we are in the suppression and extinguishing techniques. And we need to be very open, and we are very open in the paper, and we'll be very open in this presentation about the state of the art in respect to fire extinguishing. So if we move on to the next slide, Martin, please. Just a summary really of the advantages of lithium-ion batteries: high energy density, potential for yet higher capacities with existing or advancing technologies. Generally low maintenance, no periodic discharges needed, and there's no memory effect with these batteries. And whilst we talk about the incidents that we've seen on LinkedIn and the news channels around the world, these are pretty safe components, but it's just the numbers that are involved and the numbers that are entering industry and entering domestic applications that leads to the dramatic number of incidents that we actually see out there in the market. Next slide, please, Martin. So why a guidance document? Just to summarise on this: relatively number of fires involving lithium-ion batteries. Everybody who is using lithium-ion batteries needs clear information. The guidance document itself covers the origins of the fire, how to detect, control, and the state of the art in respect to suppression and extinguishing at the moment. It is intended for all professionals who deal with fire safety regarding the use, storage or transport of lithium-ion batteries. And it is a dynamic document. We will add to the document as more information becomes available. We can see obviously that as time passes, battery technology will change. We do identify that in the guidance paper, that this is reflecting what we know now, and obviously what we don't know is what the future will hold with lithium-ion batteries, other than to say that the technology will continue to advance. So we've split this presentation into two particular parts. The first one is really the detail of how lithium-ion batteries work, what type of issues can arise with lithium-ion batteries, and what the available detection techniques are for detecting incidents as they arise with lithium-ion, and how we can help to prevent those escalating. And then we will move then on to the latest information in respect to where extinguishing and suppression of lithium-ion battery events stands currently. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Gerd Hulsen, who is a member of the extinguishing section within Euralarm, and Gerd will take you through the issues affecting lithium-ion batteries and the detection methods that are available in the market today. So I'll hand over to you, Gerd.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. And also a warm welcome to all of you to our virtual conference room from my side. And yes, we are very happy for being able to present the results of the Euralarm section extinguishing work, our findings about the fire risk of lithium-ion batteries, and as Alan said, for this new type of fire hazard that is not fully understood in the marketplace yet. Yeah, in my short presentation, I would like to address the fire risk associated with lithium-ion batteries and explain what we learned to approach the topic and give a foundation needed for the development of solutions. We are addressing the fundamental questions, among others, what make the fire risk of the battery, and what signs of such an event announce or indicate that it will happen. Before then, Ellen will talk about how to mitigate the risk later. Next slide, Martin, please. Yeah, to understand the fire risk, we must have a look inside a lithium-ion battery cell. Yeah, a lithium-ion battery cell consists of two electrodes, the negative electrode, the anode, and the positive electrode, the cathode. And the distance between the electrode is typically in the range of 200 micron. The electrodes consist of a collector and the active material applied to it. And between the electrodes, we have a ion-conducting flammable electrolyte, which mediates the process in the cell, and the typically 50 micron thin separator. This is less than a hair breadth, ensuring the electrical separation of the electrodes. Next slide, please. Yeah, lithium batteries combined, as Ellen already said, high energy. We are talking about 150 to 200 watt hours per kilogram battery with a typically flammable electrolyte, which makes also 15% of the cell's weight. So any damage to the separator caused either mechanically or by high temperatures will lead to internal short circuit with a very high probability of thermal runaway. In addition, as any technical system can fail, overcharging and overload can also occur, what then can lead to a breakdown of the separator and developing of a thermal runaway, leading to a temperature increase, causing the usually highly flammable electrolyte start evaporating, and consequently the internal pressure within the cell will continue to build up until the electrolyte vapor is released, either via an indesigned overpressure release valve or by other cell types by just bursting of the shell. And without countermeasures, an explosive gas-air mixture will be created and only an ignition source is needed, and the result will be an explosion like fire. And when then packing cell by cell, with the risk of propagation of the thermal runaway from cell to cell. But even if we exclude all external forces, there always remains the risk of age-related damage and, of course, some undetected material defects to cause that separator damage and the subsequent internal short circuit. So we can say it is a filigree design, the ever-increasing density and the risk of separator damage due to manufacturing faults or aging of the battery that are causes of the danger of separator damage. Yeah, And since pictures, especially moving pictures, say more than 1,000 words or even the most beautiful graphics, let us watch the following video. Martin. Before starting the video, I would like to briefly explain what can be seen. On the left side, we see a fire text box from the outside. We recognize, I'm sure you will recognize, not without reason, the very robust construction. Then you see here an exhaust air system and a pressure relief flap here in the background. Yeah, and on the right half on the screen, the screen show the inside of the battery. The inside of the battery. The battery is about 1 kilogram of weight and having a capacity, as said before, in the range of 200 watt hours, containing 150 gram electrolyte. And the state of charge is, 100% plus and is driven into thermal runaway by massive overcharging. And this is done at ambient air conditions with 21% oxygen. Now please play back and start again. Thank you. So I just out. Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Can you get next slide, please, direct? Yeah, and this was just without scaring you. This was just a single cell, as I said, 200 watt hours, and we know in cars we have in bigger cars we have something between 50 and 70 kilowatt hours. You can imagine the number of cells, the number of the quantity of electrolyte they have there. So we're talking about a significant fire risk here. Yeah, and we can note typically there's that internal short we forced here with by massive overcharging of the cells. But in reality, we have it due to aging or material defects in most cases, so a lot of cases. And this causes then the cell to heat up. And for some cell types, it can lead to early pyrolysis already. At a temperature above 80 degrees Celsius, the highly flammable electrolyte vapor starts to boil and escape from the cell. And this event characterized the off-gassing. And we learned that the detection of this off-gassing event is time to initiate intervention or to take interventional actions. Yeah, and the temperature goes on increasing until the separator collapses or separator fails. And this leads then to a catastrophic temperature increase within milliseconds in the battery and the consequent explosion of the combustible electrolyte gases, as you could see in the video. And in the following slides, I will share the findings about when or at what stage, what detector type or what physical phenomenon is going along with the development of thermal runaway. Yeah, let us start with heat detectors first. Next slide, yeah. So at this slide, you see, or at this test, lithium-ion battery cell type you have seen in the video before, is was forced into thermal runaway by massive overcharging. And we read the temperature at 2 points. One, and the graph on the left side shows the overview of the temperature management. Green curve, you see, shows the temperature at battery cell surface, and the red curve shows the temperature measured at the distance of 1 centimeter above the cell. And the graphics on the right side shows details by zooming in. And we can see, yeah, that the surface temperature is increasing slowly but steadily with overcharge. The temperature above the cell, apart from the time of the off-gassing event, you see it here, a moment here, I must move my mouse to that screen here, is giving no indication of a battery problem at all. So we see that the temperature sensors are only suitable for detecting a developing thermal runaway when really contacted to the battery surface or able to read the surface temperature. We know that their sensors technology is able to do that even without contact. This means that it also makes sense to measure the temperature, the surface temperature of batteries whenever possible. And batteries with the surface temperature measurably above the ambient temperature should be put to side. Next slide, please. Yeah, and in comparison, we see here now a gas sensor in test. And as a sample for a gas sensor, we have taken a carbon monoxide sensor. And what we see, the carbon monoxide gas sensor, as an example for gas sensors, is really able to detect the off-gas event immediately. We reach within very short time 40 ppm and more, what's the typical alarm level. So off-gassing detection by gas detection is working properly. And in comparison, you see also optical detectors in the test, the two blue lines here, and we can say that standard optical smoke detectors do not detect the off-gassing. The optical standard detectors, forward or backward scatter doesn't play a role, are detecting nothing before the release of smoke and gas at the separator collapse. Yeah. Next slide, Martin. And finally, a test of aspirating smoke detectors with dual wavelength technology, done with very small cylindric cells, much smaller, 30 times smaller than the battery type we have seen at test, these 18650 cylindric cells. So being able to test that detector at the limit. And let us have a look on the first graph top left. This is showing the heating curve. You must say, yeah, there are different battery technology on the market, and you can do a lot right when selecting the right battery type. These cylindric cells, the modern ones, the state-of-the-art ones, you are not able to overcharge. So you must find other methods to bring them into, or force them into thermal runaway. One of the remaining one is penetrating with a spike, but of course this will not give us the chance to do an early detection. The other one is then heating up the battery cell. And this is what's done here. Continuous heating from room temperature up to 180 degrees in approximately 30 minutes. And after the cell temperature of 150 degrees is reached, the overpressure relief device of this battery type opens and releases the vaporized electrolytes. And several minutes later, continuous heating causes the separator to collapse, resulting in a short circuit, and we know the story, almost simultaneously with thermal runaway. And the second graph then showing the calculated danger signal of the aspirating smoke detector in test. Yeah, and we can say that air sampling and signal analysis directly give us the indication of alarm here in the event of thermal runaway. As a result of this test with ASDs with dual wavelength technology, yeah, those detectors are able to detect the off-gas event immediately. Yeah, so next slide, Martin. Yeah, we learned that we can divide the development of the process of a thermal runaway into two phases or zones. And we call these zones the preventive zone, showed here in green, and the containment zone. And we learned that in the preventive zone, characterized by pyrolysis and off-gassing, there is a general chance to prevent the full development of thermal runaway or to significantly mitigate the impact of it. And in the second phase, which begins with a massive collapse of the separator, only one thing matters, that is the containment of the extent of the damage. Now this is what we learned. This is bringing me back to the already to the next slide here. Yeah, and finally, yeah, we can state that the sooner developing thermal runaway is detected, the greater the chance of limiting the event down to a manageable level. And here we can say the very early detection based on gas or aerosol particle detection direct after that off-gassing of the cell is key. And of course, have in mind, there's never a one-fits-all solution. Different detection technologies and types of detectors have different characteristics, and a suitable solution must be selected case by case according to the application and installation. Yeah, the detection system plays a key role as an early measure to stop the propagation of thermal runaway and significantly limit the overall damage. And I would like, before giving back to Ellen, I would like to close my part of the presentation with another video which shows to what extent the catastrophic event from the first video can be reduced if we have the chance to prepare the environment on time. So next. So also before starting, same test box on the left side. Another battery, a new one, a fresh one on the left side. But now the compartment is filled with a gaseous extinguishing agent. And yeah, play, Martin. Thank you. What you can do to really mitigate the risk when having the information about the battery problem on time. Yeah, thank you from my side, and I would like to hand over back to Ellen.
Thank you, Gert. Martin, could you move to the next slide, please? So when we talk about suppression and extinguishing options to deal with these events, I think we have to start, as I said in the introduction, that there is no single solution for all the potential fire incidents, and certainly in respect to that stage that was very well illustrated by Gerd, once we get to that thermal runaway stage, the suppressing and extinguishing technologies are generally not yet available. There is a lot of work going on in that area, and whilst I would say as a general rule those technologies are not widely available, certainly advances have been made with certain products and with certain technologies, and we're getting to a stage where we need to see those proven with fire testing, standardized methods of assessing the capabilities of those extinguishers one against the other, and understanding exactly what the limits of applicability are for each of those agents. Certainly in Gerd's presentation, where we were in this preventative zone, there is a case for releasing extinguishing agents of different types, and using those extinguishing agents to prevent the spread of that incident to the point that it becomes a thermal runaway event. So preventing the events developing to the point that it becomes uncontrollable is definitely one of the solutions that is considered within the guidance paper. When I speak about testing, there are many test programs that are being undertaken around the world. Obviously, each test scenario is involving different types of batteries, different configurations, different cell types. But as a general rule, test standards are not developed yet, and this is a focus area for the standards bodies to look at test standards that can be brought to the market to give confidence that the solutions that are offered can actually do the job that they're employed to do. Certainly the early work that is taking shape at the moment appears to be around portable extinguishers and how different portable extinguishing agents can be applied, but again, very early stages here in the development of those standards, but a lot of focus on that. For sure, the focus on early detection and preventative suppression of the types that Gerd has explained, and those early activations of suppression equipment can help. I think at this stage it's fair to say that the success is being measured based on the prevention of spread between cells. So if you are able to contain an event to one or a small number of cells and prevent that going throughout the whole of the structure of the component or the device, then a level of success has been achieved. But again, it's early days. We're not able to confidently predict what agents will prevent that spread between the different cells, whether those are cylindrical cells or pouch cells, etc. So still early stages in the evaluation of the success of those agents. Next slide, Martin. So the fire protection systems that we've considered in the paper are really all of the ones that you see in the market, whether it's automatic water systems, including sprinklers, whether it's gaseous systems, including the inert gases and the halocarbon agents, foam and water-based media, powder systems, aerosols, oxygen reduction and portable fire extinguishers. None of these has any acceptability to prevent a thermal runaway event from expanding, but any of these can be used in the right application to consider the prevention of that event from developing into thermal runaway. In the paper, we talk about what the advantages are of each of these technologies. We don't make conclusions in respect to how successful by degree they are in preventing thermal runaway or spread, but we do make a general statement, and the general assumption in the paper is that none of these technologies will actually stop thermal runaway once it has actually started. So this will be an area of focus as we move forward and develop further iterations of the paper. Martin, next slide, please. So the key issues here really are that it is important to consider what the objectives are of the suppression or the extinguishing system. And that goes beyond lithium-ion batteries. Of course, those objectives should always be considered when selecting a suppression or extinguishing technique for any application. But in the early stages of the understanding of how to deal with lithium-ion fires, then it becomes even more important that we do actually consider what the objectives are of the suppression system and prevention to stop that becoming a thermal runaway event. Each system layout design, and especially the application of the agent, is very important for the correct functioning of the system, and also critically important, correct installation, the use of approved, and when we say approved, we generally mean third-party approved systems, and equally important, the continual ongoing maintenance by appropriately trained and experienced staff. Those are really key issues. I'd just like to give a plug for two other Euralarm papers here. We have written a guidance paper on approved systems and exactly what is defined and meant by an approved system, and also how we would consider ongoing maintenance to be critical and what an end user should look for when selecting how to achieve that ongoing maintenance. So I would urge you to take a look at those papers as well, which have been produced in the last 12 months by the Euralarm extinguishing section. Next slide, Martin, please. So managing the risk. So we've discussed some of these earlier in the presentation. Manufacturing defects, obviously something that is not within the remit of the fire protection engineer, but is a responsibility for the whole industry there. Physical damage during handling, storage and transportation. Separator defect due to aging, which is something that Gerd touched on. Mechanical abuse, so damage to a lithium-ion battery through crushing or penetration. Thermal abuse, so exposure to high temperatures from flame or heat, either external or from adjacent cells once that event has been triggered. And then electrical abuse, whether it's under or overcharging, and short circuits that take place when problems have actually started. Next slide, please, Martin. And so coming back to the diagram that you've seen several times during the presentation, risk prevention, so avoiding that battery abuse in the first place. And if we achieve that, then we have certainly taken away many of the triggers for the events that have been described. Potential pyrolysis, off-gas generation, and obviously the detection of off-gas, the separator collapse leading to thermal runaway, explosion and fire generation. And as Gerd had explained in his part of the presentation, we categorise these into those two zones of the prevention zone and the containment zone. Next slide, Martin, please. So in the conclusions that we draw, that the release of toxic and flammable and dangerous gases may present a severe hazard before thermal runaway takes place. So it's not only when this thermal runaway event has occurred do we see a significant risk. Some of the work that's been done has shown that the gases that are released are extremely toxic, and we've got hydrogen cyanide there, we've got hydrogen fluoride and others that will present a very, very severe hazard to people in the locality before we even get to that thermal runaway stage. Absolutely clear is that lithium-ion battery incidents can develop into significant and unstoppable thermal runaway events. Incipient and pre-fire conditions in batteries can be detected, and as Gerd had illustrated there are a number of techniques that can be used that can actually help address the early onset of conditions that may ultimately lead to thermal runaway. So next slide, please, Martin. And so the conclusions that we would draw, that the key to successful fire protection is preventing that battery abuse, containment, early off-gas detection, battery shutdown through the battery management system. And then just to reiterate, suppressing or extinguishing any fire that can threaten the batteries. That's the key differentiator on how we can currently use suppression and extinguishing technologies at this early stage of intervention. We can use that to reduce heat propagation from cell to cell, cooling the adjacent cells that make up the battery pack. And then one really for the fire authorities and people dealing with an incident after this has occurred, dealing with the batteries in a post-fire scenario. And I'm sure colleagues around the world involved in the fire industry will fully support that this is just one area of the industry where a risk assessment is required and absolutely essential, that we consider, you know, how the batteries are stored, what is the potential for the damage to occur to those batteries, what detection technologies can be employed, is there an opportunity to integrate an early release of a suppressing or extinguishing agent to prevent further incident developing and therefore preventing us getting to that thermal runaway stage. Next slide, please. And so in the introduction, we spoke about the guidance that was that was available. The guidance document has been produced in 4 languages, in English, French, German and Spanish. We're always open to additional translations if the need is there. The document is available free of charge. It is quite a lengthy document. It explains the events that can lead to battery damage and incidents. It talks about the applications for lithium-ion batteries, goes into some detail about the technical issues surrounding the detection, talking about this preventative zone, how different extinguishing agents can be employed in that preventative zone, and containment. It is a dynamic document. It will evolve over time. If there are people who have joined the webinar today feel that they have sufficient interest in this particular area, Euralarm extinguishing section is always open and willing to embrace new members and bring this technical expertise to bear for the benefit of the industry, not only in Europe but worldwide. Next slide, Martin. I don't know that this is where I hand over back to Paul here, but if you are interested in following Euralarm, you can do so on LinkedIn. If you are interested in membership of Euralarm, or in particular and specifically the extinguishing section, then you can certainly make an inquiry to the secretariat at euralarm.org. And I think I do hand over back to yourself now, Paul, to lead into the questions and answers session.
Thank you, Gert and Alan, for the presentation. It's a lot of information in a very short time, and as you mentioned, the guidance, of course, gives more details. You answered already a few questions, Alan. The question was if the document was available, and you already showed a few slides ago that it's available on the Euralarm website and you can download it from them. Got also a question if the presentation will be made available. We will make the presentation available also through the website, so that you can download that if there is interest on that site. I got a few questions in. One is an interesting one, I think. Is it possible, you showed in different slides that the thermal runaway seemed to be a critical point where the battery goes off. Is there a way to stop a thermal runaway of a lithium-ion cell once it's started?
Did I take that, Gerd, or do you wish to take that?
You already unmuted to take it.
Go ahead, Gerd.
Yeah, you can take it as a. Yeah, the question is no. If the thermal runaway is in development, there is nothing to stop that. It will happen. Yeah, there of course it's possible to slow the development speed a little bit. Yeah, by cooling, by massive cooling. You can pause it if you like, but in the end it will happen. Yeah, the initial one is not stoppable.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that, Gerd, and say that you know, some of the work that I've seen and been involved with is looking at technologies or techniques that can actually prevent that spread from one cell to another. And it certainly seems to be one of the endpoints at the moment is to see how much any suppression or extinguishing technique or technology can actually stop the spread from one cell to another. It's obviously a very significant event, and stopping that spread is extremely difficult. But you know, that there have been some examples where some prevention of spread has been possible, so preventing that thermal runaway moving from one cell to the next, and certainly taking out every cell or every part of the battery.
Thank you. Another question which came in is the kind of applications which are covered in the Euralarm guidance. Can you?
Yeah, sure. What we do is that we basically go from very small to very large in the document, looking at applications at a very small kilowatt hour usage up to very large ones, and obviously as we go through the document we talk about what those end use applications are of the batteries, and I think that's probably an area that, as lithium-ion battery technology evolves, will be one that we will develop over time. More applications will arise, maybe different types of batteries will emerge. I think one thing that is very clear is that even with the inevitable developments that there will be in battery technology, there is an installed base out there now that will be in play either in its original form or in some reconfigured or recertified or recycled form for many, many years to come. And so this is an issue that will be with us for a long, long time, irrespective of what type of battery technology comes along in the future.
There was a question about we presented something about the off gases in the when the battery runs out in a battery runaway. Is there any specific type of gas detector we recommend for this thermal rate to detect it, or is that still an open question?
I guess I could start and then hand over to Gerd on that. What obviously we don't want to comment on is is particular brands of detection equipment that is out there, but certainly techniques that are very specifically aimed at the off-gas detection, and then techniques that look at aspirating types of detection are available on the market and are being widely used. And it's not our place to promote any particular brand or brand name of these devices, but just to say that there are both specific off-gas detection types and aspirating detection types out there on the market. Gerd, I don't know whether you wish to add to that.
I just see here in the Q&A session the question, what we believe is the first gas released. What we know is, and tests have shown that it's a whole cocktail of gases released in that event. Not only gases, we have aerosols, we have conductive salt, we have the condense from condensed vapor. So it's a bunch. It's a nice mixture, and there are different ways to detect that. Yeah, and approved ones. Yeah.
Thanks. As a question which is related with another question which was also in the chat, are there guidances available for helping planners in selecting the right solutions for lithium-ion batteries? And maybe related with a question in the chat which came up, if there are any European standards already available or related with the problems around ion batteries.
Good. Do you want to go? Or
I would say, Mr. President, your call.
Mr. President or Mr. Chairman?
Chairman, sorry. So,
okay, sorry. I'm not the president. Although I believe the UK is looking for another prime minister, but I'm not going to go for that one either at the moment. For sure, the guidance does talk about the technologies, and very clearly it guides you through the types of detection methods. In the introduction to Euralarm, Jean did mention that we have a fire section as well as an extinguishing section within Euralarm, and our colleagues in the fire section, which predominantly focuses on detection, have been involved in their sections of this particular paper. So the different technologies that are available within the fire detection area are discussed in the paper. And so again, we try to outline what the risk is and what the solutions are that may be available for the particular hazards that we encounter here.
And in relation to European standards, is there any European standard in this area already available?
The simple answer is no, in respect to what we're looking at in terms of fire suppression and fire extinguishing. There is some early work that is going on in CEN that will start to look at how those test standards could be developed, in particular initially in respect to handheld portable applications.
Thanks for that. There are a few remarks in the chat around how we educate the market, and the example is given for UPS suppliers who don't understand how to store batteries. Is there any activity on our side, on Euralarm side, to give them a better education or to educate them in a better way so that they know how to deal with these units?
We haven't put that within the guidance at the moment, Paul. I think some of the groups that are working on these issues around Europe and around the world are looking at those things, and as information becomes available to us that we can bring into the paper, we will certainly do so. I think I've mentioned on a couple of occasions that it is a dynamic document. We will continue to increase the information that's available within that document and issue periodic updates as and when they are appropriate.
Thanks for that. I think Ellen and Gert, we answered the questions which came in on your presentation. If any of the people online have any more questions or remarks or suggestions, please feel free to reach out. You can use the Euralarm address, but you can also find the Euralarm addresses from the professional team and the technical managers which support the different sections on the website, and that will be taken into account in the next section meeting from the extinguishing section. I for sure want to thank Ellen and Gert already before I hand over back to Jan to close the webinar. Jan?
Thank both Ellen and Gert for an excellent presentation, very informative. Also being able to answer the questions. It's not always so easy to do that. Thank you for the rest of you for joining us in this webinar. If you're not already members, I think Ellen mentioned it, we'd be pleased to see you join. If you are interested, you can find on our website how to join us, and we would be thrilled to see you here. In the next teams, I know that especially the extinguishing section would be thrilled to see more members join to strengthen that team, which already is very strong and very active. So thank you, and wishing you a good rest of the day.
Thank you.